everybody, Germ here, and I am mentally diseased. Today I'm very excited to bring a special guest on with me, my mother, also known as Auntie J, or formerly known as Jeanie. That's her real name, everybody. You heard it here. You may be familiar with her from my channel. She's been on before. We talked a little bit about what it was like for her to shun her child, that would be me, when I left Jehovah's Witnesses. Turns out it wasn't fun for either one of us, and she ended up leaving the religion quite a few years later. So we're going to talk today a little bit about her whole life story, because it turns out she's been around a lot longer than I have, and what led up to her leaving the Witnesses and all of that. So to start with, you were one of the rare converts to Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm sure a lot of people have noticed that most XJW stories tend to be from people who were born into the religion because there's not a whole lot of converts. Their conversion rate is really, really low. So you were one of the rare few that actually converted.
Yes.
So it'd be fun to talk about how in the world that happened to such a smart young girl. And but before we get there, let's talk a little bit about what your life was like pre-Jehovah's Witnesses. What was your family life like? What was your childhood like? All of that before the Witnesses got a hold of you.
Okay. I was a sweet little girl from rural America. Grew up in the country. Did very well in school. But unbeknownst to my mother and my siblings, extended family, neighbors, I was being sexually abused by my father. Not only was I being sexually abused by him, but he was spiritually abusing me by using scripture to make excuses for what he was doing. And those of you who are familiar with the story of Lot and his daughters will understand what I'm talking about. If not, look it up. And as the years went by, the abuse got worse and worse, and the spiritual abuse also got worse and worse because his religiosity had changed from the Bible to the darker side, if you will, and the abuse got darker and darker and more ritualistic to the point that when I was a teenager, the sweet little girl was gone, and I was just this wild child that was lost. I was very lost, very troubled. I was dating 25 to 30 something year old men when I was 13 years old. I was partying, stealing, running away from home. I lived in a tree fort in a ditch for a while on my own with, I'd take scraps of wood and scrap carpet and make a home out of it. It was a very rough existence for me. And that's where I was when I wasn't homeless at that point, but where I was mentally, that's where I was mentally when I met my ex-husband.
Okay, and you were how old then?
I was 16 when I met him. He was 26.
16 and he was 26. And so was he a Jehovah's Witness?
He was not, but he had studied before, and I had expressed that my way of life wasn't working for me and I needed to make some changes, and I wanted to go to church or do whatever it took to be a normal person, because I felt if I was a good girl again, I'd be loved again and my life would go right. And he insisted that he knew where the truth was, and that was with Jehovah's Witnesses. And being young, I didn't feel like I had many options, so I ended up going to a Kingdom Hall with him.
Okay. So he had all of the truth and knew exactly what you needed. You just needed to be saved, really, it sounds like.
Yes.
You needed structure and guidance and love, probably.
Yes.
So tell us about your first visit to it. Did you study with anybody before going to the Kingdom Hall?
No, he just, put us in the hot rod, and off to the Kingdom Hall we went.
Ran off. So what was your first visit to a Kingdom Hall like?
Weird. Honestly, because I'd been to church as a kid and stuff, and I just thought it was really strange, particularly the second part of it where they have their little paper magazines out and they're reading from the paragraphs and raising their hands like they're in class, and then people run around with microphones to answer and stuff. I thought that was a little bit odd. And so I got up in the middle of it to go to the restroom. And when I came out of the stall, there were like 6 women there to attack me, basically. Oh, honey, what's your name? How are you? You know, they just seemed very attentive to me and very loving to me, that I kind of referred to it as being, now that I know it's called love bombing. I, of course, didn't know that as a young girl, but I say I was love bombed in the John.
So they love bombed you in the John, but you went back.
I did.
You did. Why did you go back?
I didn't go to the same one. We went to a different one, and he set it up to where people would start to study it. Because I did want to learn the Bible, and they offered a free home Bible study. And I thought that I thought was kind of neat. Mm-hmm. That they were willing to come to your house and study the Bible with you. Okay. So when my ex-husband told me about that, I was all up for it. So I started to study. Okay.
So you basically wanted to learn about the Bible. And how long did you study before you got baptized?
Oh, I can't remember if I was 17 or 18. I think I was 18, because it was just after you were born that I got baptized. Okay. So I would have been about 18, I think.
Yeah. Wow. So when you got baptized, did you have any idea of what you were getting yourself into?
No, not really. No. I mean, you hear the word disfellowshipping and things like that, but you think you've got the truth, so you think it's not going to happen to you anyway. Right. That's for the evil people. Right. That's not for the rest of us good people. Yeah. You know, so it's kind of glossed over. Yeah. Plus, back then I was studying the Live Forever book, and I did not have to complete the book to get baptized. So I hadn't finished the book yet. Because back then you could study up to a certain point, as long as you could answer their questions. For those who don't know, you can't just, jump in a pool and say, I accept Jesus and get baptized. It's a whole different program with the witnesses. You have to answer a series of questions from a book. And if you can answer those, then bingo, you win. You get to be baptized and on your way to salvation, basically. So I had not even finished the book. And then they study with you for I think up 6 months to a year after that. And you can go into a second book. So I hadn't even finished the first book when I got baptized. Okay.
Well, I mean, it sounds like, your normal Jehovah's Witness story. They were preying on the weak. Mm-hmm. They found you when you were weak, and that's how they got you. You were in a vulnerable position after having been abused your whole life. Mm-hmm. And, you needed love and you needed structure, and they swooped right in to get you. Yes. Yeah. I guess technically, and it wasn't even one of them that did it. That's the worst part. It was someone that, I guess he would have been a pomie. Your ex-husband at the time, he would have been a pomie, huh? Because he wasn't. Yes,
but he hadn't been baptized. He had just studied, but he had that same mentality. Yeah. I look at it a little differently now. I don't think he was ever concerned about my spiritual welfare. I think he was concerned about controlling me. Okay.
So let's talk. Let's get into that. So you got baptized. You became a Jehovah's Witness. You popped out a couple of kids, and so what was life like being a Jehovah's Witness?
I was miserable every day of my life, honestly, because I woke up every day thinking how the night before I made Jehovah mad, or what I was going to do that day to disappoint Jehovah. I was in a very unhappy marriage. And I couldn't get out of it. I financially couldn't get out of it. I spiritually couldn't get out of it. And I had started to resign myself that this is what life is like, that this is how you pick up your torture stake and go, that life is literally torture. Oh, yeah. I was very depressed, very anxious. Yeah. Truthfully miserable, really.
So tell us about the husband, the ex-husband. Why would you feel that you mentioned earlier that he just wanted to control you. So what was that like in relation to the religion?
Because every decision from what you were going to wear that day or what TV program you were going to watch, if it didn't agree with him, you had I'm the head of the house
Right.
saying, thrown in your face several times a day.
Yes.
And you couldn't get away from. I mean, I didn't learn to drive till I was 26. One of the sisters taught me to drive, even though to this day he claims he did. He did not. She did. And even then, if I went places he didn't want, he'd pull the distributor cap out of my car. He controlled everywhere I went, everything I did. You know, in fact, when I was pregnant with you, we lived in a mobile home park, and the mailboxes were like a street away. And he didn't even want me walking to the mailbox. I wasn't allowed to, you know, put up the mini blinds or anything because he didn't want anybody to see me. You know, I was controlled all the time. All the time. And I always tried fighting for my rights, believe it or not, but I didn't get very far. And if I would go to the elders and say, look, this is what he's doing this week, I need help. Somebody needs to make him stop. And basically, they did nothing. Everything was my fault. I wasn't submissive enough. I needed to be like Sarah. He would even tell me that I should call him Lord, and I would never do it.
Do you think that's what appealed to him about the religion to begin with? Do you think that he saw that it was a place that would give him indisputed power
Yes.
over other people? You think that's what attracted him to it?
Yes, because he did have indisputed power.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I even tried to leave. You were there that day. That things got incredibly crazy. I don't want to get into what all happened. But another sister and her husband came to pick us up. He called the elders, and the elders, one in particular, showed up in his car and blocked them so that they couldn't take me and you guys away. And they were threatened with disfellowshipping if they got involved.
Yeah.
I didn't want anyone else to be hurt, you know, and, you know, I didn't want anybody else disfellowshipped. I didn't want people involved in our problems. I will say that he did everything but hit me. It was all, you know, other than grabbing arms once in a while, it was everything else. It was emotional abuse over and over and over and over, controlling abuse.
Yes.
And, you know, we're talking small towns. I didn't have options of, you know, women's shelters,
Right.
places to go.
Right. There weren't really support. The only support network that you had in a small town like that was
My best
Jehovah's
friend.
Witnesses.
Yes.
And your friends within Jehovah's Witnesses. So if you did something drastic, like, you know, ticked your friends off or got them disfellowship for trying to help you,
Then I have nobody.
then you have nobody
And
and
you-
nowhere to go.
And the same for you kids, because their kids were your friends, vice versa. You'd lose everything.
Uh-huh.
So it's not as easy to just throw your hands and say, oh, I'm getting away, when you're in a community. And I had no family support either.
Right.
I had nobody.
So what happened with your family?
Well, eventually, of course, my parents got divorced and remarried. They went their separate ways.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not close to my sisters other than chit-chatting on Messenger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the whole abuse cycle ruptured the family.
Right.
Especially at one point when I did try to come forward. I tried to come forward, and basically I was punished for it.
And so you're talking about when you were abused as a child.
Yes.
You're speaking about your father's abuse towards you.
Yes, I'm speaking about that because it plays into why I didn't leave when I was a witness.
Mm-hmm.
I had nowhere to go because what happened, I'll say briefly, was that I tried to report what my father was doing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did that, social services picked me up and they took me to the sheriff. The sheriff brought me home to get my clothes, to take me to foster care. During that time, my father stopped the sheriff and demanded to speak to me alone, and the sheriff let him. And my father told me, you take your story back, or I'm going to kill all of you. I'm going to start with your mother and then your sisters, and they're going to die a slow and painful death, and then I'm going to kill you, but you're going to watch all of them die first. Well, I was terrified, so I told them I was lying. I made the whole thing up. I got ridiculed by the school counselor for doing, for being a liar, basically.
Mm-hmm.
My mom blamed me for their divorce, that I caused the extra stress, and it put a rift. It just put a rift in all of us that has never really been repaired.
Wow. So
I'm by this time, when I become a witness and I want out, I'm in a small town. I have no family support. I have no community support. I don't even have, other than some work acquaintances that I had sporadically, I had no support.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, just imagine coming from that background where you were bullied and threatened into being complicit to your abuse, and then joining this religion that promises to help you. And you feel like you can finally use your voice. You can finally say, hey, I'm being abused. Hey, I need help. And this is how they treat you. It's, not a whole lot better than your dad did.
Yeah. It's all abuse, just took a different form.
Mm-hmm.
That witnesses abused with smiles on their faces.
Yeah.
And trying to tell you that this is
While
Jehovah's way.
dangling your friends.
Dangling your
over here.
Yes. Your friends, your family, whatever. Yeah.
So yeah, and you never had a moment in between adolescence and adulthood to build any other kind of support network. And we're not talking just like socially, right? Like you didn't have savings.
No.
Did you have savings? Did you have
No, well, no, not until like the very end, where we're talking 25 years into it.
Mm-hmm.
Into being married to him. But no, because every time I got a job, he'd get jealous
mm-hmm.
about whatever man I was working with.
And you'd have to quit.
And I'd have to quit.
Yeah.
Or we'd have to work opposite shifts for, so he would take care of the kids, or I was, or, and he would stalk me.
Yeah.
He would show up at my jobs, and everybody would make fun of me because there's my husband jumping up and down, looking in the windows, trying to see what I'm doing. It was embarrassing. It was just a horrible existence. And it wasn't until years later that I was able to break away. But I had to do it strategically.
Yeah. Well, before we get there, let's talk about what led you to leaving. How did you eventually wake up? Was it me? Was I the one that did it?
Not entirely, no.
No.
and I'll explain why.
Okay.
Because I still believed it was the truth. Okay? Even though I didn't believe by this time there were lots and lots of cracks in the armor. There were certain teachings that I didn't get. Child abuse was a big, big subject for me.
Yes.
Because of what I had been through. And I remember a news report about a girl being sexually abused in Boulder, and a news article talk about him being prosecuted as a person of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And it disturbed me so much because we kept being told that this doesn't happen in Jehovah's organization, or Jehovah weed it out right away. Well, obviously I didn't weed that one out because it had been going over some time. And I talked to one of the elders about it, and he said to me, well, somebody's going to get disfellowshipped. If she can't prove it, she's going to be disfellowshipped for lying. And I said to him, well, wait a minute. Just because she may not have the proof that she's being abused, how do you have proof that she's lying? And then he just kind of gruffed and went off his other way. And then I kept just being told, wait on Jehovah, wait on Jehovah. I'm always waiting on Jehovah.
Mm-hmm.
And, there were just different teachings that weren't starting to make sense. I can't think of specifics, but I remember sometimes we'd be reading scripture or something in the watchtower, and then I read a couple scriptures down. I'm like, well, wait a minute, that's not what that's talking about, or whatever. And I was very versed in it. I gave impromptu talks all the time. I auxiliary pioneered once in a while. I gave parts on assemblies. Things just weren't adding up. When everything happened with your situation, I could still look at the Bible the way I understood it, that it wasn't my flag moment where I could tell my ex-husband, aha, they're not the truth, I'm leaving.
Right. It was just something you didn't feel great about, but it wasn't
Yeah, it was something I didn't agree with per se, but I couldn't say aha, aha, aha. And I wasn't in a position to leave either at the time. Over time, I started realizing that I would eventually leave my ex-husband. So with my tips from cutting hair, I'd start saving a little bit here and there because there's no way he could know how much I made. Or, change. I'd find change on the road. I'd start saving it. Because I knew eventually I was just going to leave and take my chances with Jehovah. Right or wrong, I was just going to take my chances. But it was difficult too because what I didn't mention before too is that I think is important is even though he wasn't a physical abuser per se, I always knew when to stop antagonizing him. In my particular situation, I'm not speaking to anybody else's. Because I always had that fear that one day he would lose it and either hit me or kill me because he would stalk me. And I think that's important to say because when I did leave, he did have me stalked. But anyway, what ultimately was the killer for me was seeing Barbara Anderson on, I believe it was NBC in 2007. And she was talking about Silent Lambs. She was talking about the child abuse cases that had been settled in court. And my ex-husband was there watching the news report with me. And I just stood up and I said, I am done. Just this time last year, they had us go to door to door with Kingdom News 37. They told us that, Babylon the Great was going to be destroyed for covering up child abuse and how nasty the Catholic Church was because of all these things. And then here we are, within a year later, the Watchtower has the same problem. There's no way you just don't know about that. Them, the higher-ups, the governing body. You're settling cases. It's not like, in October, all these kids came forward or all these young people came forward, and now we're settling it in November. No, it's been going on. So I knew right then and there that they were the unrepentant wrongdoers. They were liars. They knew they were liars. And they used us to go out and lie to other people while all these children are being hurt. And I looked at my husband at the time and I said, I'm done. I'm never going to a meeting again. That's it.
And what did he say?
He called the elders on me.
Of course.
Like always.
Yes. Did you meet with the elders?
Of course.
You did?
Yes. They showed up the next day and it was ridiculous. I explained to them, look, I was assured these problems don't happen in our organization. I was assured that if it did, it was handled immediately, that Jehovah cared about our young people and would take care of it. And their response to me was, well, aren't you satisfied that they're receiving money? Aren't you happy about the settlements? And I'm like, the whole point. This is not supposed to be happening.
Right.
And we were lied to. And we went out and lied to other people.
Yeah.
Because of what you taught us. You're not the truth.
Yeah.
So that was the end of me going. And he kept calling the elders on me. And the elders kept showing up to the point that, you know what, I'm done. It'll be a blessing for me to disassociate myself, put in my letter, and be finished. Because then they can't talk to me and I don't have it to hear it anymore. Because at the time, I could not leave him still.
Right.
I hadn't saved enough money. I hadn't orchestrated things. It would be I want to say it'd be about another 3 years before I could actually leave. So I was stuck with him. But at least by dissociating, he couldn't call and rat on me anymore and make them show up. And he wasn't allowed to talk to me about spiritual things, even though he would do everything else but show up and come home from a meeting like, oh, Sister so-and-so really misses you. She misses going out in service with you. And, oh, Sister so-and-so sure enjoyed your talks. And I had to finally get mean about it and say, I don't give a rat's ass what Sister so-and-so is doing because she's out there promoting an organization that protects pedophiles. So she can kiss my ass, basically.
Yeah.
And I had to get blunt like that and kind of nasty because I was sick of hearing it.
Yeah. Wow. So you finally put your foot down, you put in your letter of disassociation, and you were stuck with him for another 3 years, trying to get you to go back. And so what happened after the 3 years?
I just had saved enough money, and I had my girlfriend that tried to rescue us, that was a witness years before, where the elders blocked her car. By this time she was out and had been out for several years.
Yes.
So she pulled up in her car. We loaded what we could get, and your brother and I went and leased an apartment together, and I moved out. And I was separated for a while, got suckered into going back briefly, and that didn't last long. But I did get away, and I was very proud of myself. I had my own apartment. I had my own job.
And that was the first time you'd lived on your own.
It was the first time I'd lived on my own.
Ever. I was really proud of you during that time, because you were standing on your own 2 feet for the first time in your life.
Yes.
And that's when we had our first Christmas.
Yes, and that was fun.
Yeah.
And that lasted for quite a while. And then there was a death in his side of the family, and he had changed, and he wouldn't pressure me. And I was struggling financially a bit. And I started to kind of think, well, maybe I should go back for a while, and maybe he's changed. And that lasted all of 3 months. And then it blew up and got a very violent episode happened. And when he raised his fist at me in the public, it happened in public with lots of people to see. So if you run into him and say, oh, that didn't happen, believe me, it happened. Lots of people saw it in a public sidewalk, and tell me how I had brought the demons to that town, and I was full of the devil. And it reminded me so much of what my father said to me when I was a teenager, that I just looked at him and I said, I'm done. I don't care if I have to live in the street. I don't care if I have to live in a car. I will never go back with that man ever again. And I never did. I was done, filed for divorce very shortly after, and I never went back.
Wow.
And we aren't friends. Sorry to disappoint anyone.
He's still a witness.
He's still a witness, and we will never be friends.
So tell us about what your life has been like post JW, all of this. How long have you been out now?
I've been out since 2007. It was a struggle at first, because even though I knew it wasn't the truth, for the first couple of years, I'd have that little fear come over me, like, oh my God, Armageddon's coming tomorrow. What if I'm wrong?
Right. Yeah.
What if I'm wrong? So I'd do some research, and we didn't have as much research on the internet that we do today. We had meetup groups, there were a few chat rooms, things like that, message boards. So I would do research on anything that popped in my head, like the UN connection just blew me away. So things like that, to reassure myself, like, no, you didn't leave the truth. It's not the truth. So that took me a couple of years. And my bigger thing, I had to put that aside, because I had to figure out, who am I? I have been told who I am my whole life. From the time I was itty bitty, through a teenager, through an adult, who I am and what I represented. And so I had to discover myself. What do I believe? What do I not believe? What do I enjoy, not enjoy? And so that took longer. I had to learn social skills, because I was so programmed. Everything was scripted.
Yeah.
You had your reasoning book. You had your kingdom ministry that told you what to say to people.
Yeah, I didn't know how to improv. Turns out most conversation is improv.
Yes, and I still struggle with improv. Like, this is a little difficult. I don't have my little notes, people, like I did for my talks. So yeah. I'm just kind of improvising. I still struggle with that. But social skills was very difficult because, I didn't know how to live in the real world. And so I had to kind of learn, a lot of self-help books. It's been great to be out. I'm remarried very happily. We have a lot of fun together. I'm artistic. I write. I love nature.
Yeah.
I love it here in Florida. I loved Colorado too.
All these years later, and you finally get to be the person you were meant to be.
And what's great the best thing I discovered is that life is not waking up in fear.
Yes.
Life is not waking up miserable, wondering what you've done wrong or what you're going to do wrong.
Yeah.
It's
so liberating. Like you don't really understand it until you've done it. Like lived a day where you're not scared or worried. You don't care what other people are thinking.
Right. Right. It's been great to, like you said, I'm not living in fear every single day, worrying what, someone's going to come home from work and what kind of hell we're going to have, or, oh, I got to go to the dreaded meeting and I got to do this or that, or steady.
Yeah.
It's just nice to know that life doesn't have to be miserable.
Yeah.
It's a good life.
Yeah. Well, there's obviously so much more to your story than we talked about here. Some of it's kind of awkward too because I'm her kid.
Yes.
She probably doesn't want to talk to me about it face to face, even though she's told me all the time over the phone. Maybe not on camera.
Yeah.
But you are writing a book. Tell us about your book.
My book is called The Breeze Between the Plum Trees. It has significance. It's a place where I found peace as a child. And I detail what happened to me, how I dealt with it, eventually how I've overcome many things. And my hope is that people that have come from an abusive background can find peace in their lives. And it's also my hope that people that have not come from that background will be able to recognize it in somebody else and be able to reach out in a positive way to help them.
Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah.
And at least understand them.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. So we are all looking forward to this book. I've been looking forward to it for a very long time.
I may get it done this century.
You all be sure to nag her about it. But that is where you'll find the rest of her story in depth. But I thank you so much for coming on to tell us what you could about it. I really appreciate that. Thank you. This was hard for you to do.
Yes.
Yeah. Why was it difficult?
It's not easy talking about an uncomfortable subject.
Yeah.
And I hope that I have answered some questions for people. I hope that I've encouraged some people. And that's about all I can really offer, is that this is my story, this is my truth, this is my experience, right, wrong, or indifferent. And I've grown from all of it. Mm-hmm. And I'm a happy, well-adjusted person now. And you can be too. If I could sell it in a bottle, I would.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming onto the channel. Be sure to nag her about that book so that you can get all of the juicy details. Subscribe for more videos, and we will catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.